What's up, y'all? Welcome into episode 4 of Southern Draw. Today, we got a special episode for you guys. SEC football only, looking at the 2023 schedules and win totals of each team. I'm here joined tonight with my co-host Rod and our producer Nick. We're happy to have y'all listening. How are we doing, guys?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, special episode recording this Wednesday night. It's 10:40 here, Eastern time zone. Gotta catch a flight in like 7 hours, so gonna knock this out for y'all. Headed home this weekend for my sister's wedding, so we're getting this out of the way and excited about that. See family and everything that comes with that.
Yeah, it's 9:42 here, Central Time Superior Time Zone. Nick's traveling, I'm traveling. I'm headed to out of the country for my honeymoon on Sunday. So
Bow chicka wow
we're knocking out this out ahead of time, and we're gonna have a good time next week. Looking forward to the beach and water sports and lots of good good food and everything that comes with that. So yeah, ready to get into the SEC schedule.
We're happy to have this episode for you guys. So we're going to start east to west, alphabetical order of each university. And of course, we're starting with the East. So first up is the Florida Gators with their win total 5.5.
Yeah, I've immediately think under here. I'm not terribly high on Florida this year. Their schedule is, pretty tough as well, especially with the out of conference game at Utah. I definitely think they dropped that one.
Yeah, I think they're gonna get destroyed in Utah. I don't think they have a shot to win that game. What about
No,
you?
no
Yep.
chance at all. It looks like Graham Mertz is going to be the guy. They also have Jack Miller from Ohio State. But it seems like it's Mertz's team. Florida last year was really bad, and they lost obviously Anthony Richardson, who's probably the most talented guy. Um, I know all of us are not very high on Billy Napier. We don't think he's going to make it through the year, or we think he might make it through the year but get canned afterwards, especially if this kind of spirals.
Yeah,
This schedule for a second year coach. The beginning is doable if you can play good. You just got to obviously play good football, but playing at Utah, last year they honestly shouldn't have won that football game. Anthony Richardson's the whole reason they even went to a bowl game, and they were still getting pounded by teams. But this schedule, especially when you get into the middle of October into November, because you got to think, you see the West, your West draw, and you're like, okay, cool, we got Arkansas, but then you got to think that's also canned between Georgia and LSU, and you're playing a school like Arkansas is a very physical brand of football. So it's not really like you're like, yeah, we get Arkansas, but it's not an off week because you have to play Georgia, obviously neutral site. Then you get Arkansas at home, then you go to LSU, and then say things spiral from there. Then you have to go to Mizzou, and then you got the new kid, not even the new kid on the block, the sleeping giant that finally is probably on the verge of waking fully back up, Florida State at the end of the season.
yeah. The last like 6 weeks of Florida's schedule is brutal, especially if South Carolina is playing well too. It's going to be really bad for them. And it's kind of funny. There was a quote from some of the guys from Florida spring game comparing Graham Mertz to Joe Burrow.
Oh my
Which I
God.
think is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. But if he does end up being Joe Burrow, hammer that over. But I think there's zero possibility in any universe that he's Joe Burrow. So they are not making a bowl game.
Yeah, no shot. Graham Mertz is never going to be anything like Joe Burrow. And y'all have mentioned on the schedule a couple points. I'm going even back further to October 7th, Vanderbilt. If they drop the Vanderbilt game again this year, then you have South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas before you even get to LSU. If they lose all of those, I can see that being a situation where they let Napier go mid-season.
That's a good point, actually. I was literally thinking, based on that schedule, I was like, if Mertz just improves a little bit, this could be like a 6-7 win season. But like if he plays how he's normally played, this could be a 4-8, 5-7 year, no problem at all.
Yeah, it's looking grim, I think, for Florida next season. The only real names on there, that name recognition, obviously, Etienne's little brothers, their backup running back. And then Pearsall at wide receiver is really good, but it's just Florida that's kind of devoid of talent from what they're used to.
Yeah, their roster is very thin. You just don't expect that. I mean, even with losing Anthony Richardson and a couple other guys, you'd think there'd be someone to fill back in because it is Florida. There's just nothing. I mean, it's I'm really shocked they haven't added more people through the portal, but I mean, I guess Napier thinks they have what it takes to compete on the roster already, but I don't see it.
I think their biggest addition wasn't even a player. I think it was the DC from Southern Miss because his defense. I mean, it won't. It's the offense has to be good too. I mean, you can look at A&M last year; they had a pretty dang good defense, and they were a god awful football team. But he's coming in from Southern Miss and Florida. I think they were 97th overall in passing defense last year, which isn't going to help with the teams you're playing in the East. Like, well, I guess with Kentucky more run based in Georgia, but Georgia's going to beat the hell out of them anyways. But he'll improve. I mean, he had the USM defense like they had never really been before, and they were coming off back-to-back 3-win seasons. And I have it right here, though. He had 7th in the interceptions his defense was in the country, 3rd on 4th down conversion defense, 3rd in tackles for loss, and 4th in sacks while he was coaching at USM. So if he can kind of bring that over to Florida, I think it could help him win some of those 50-50 games. But overall, even with if things were fully clicking on D, the offense just isn't there to win more than 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, running through their schedule, the only 2 games that you can mark as absolute wins is McNeese and Charlotte. I mean, you can probably count on Vanderbilt, but they're going to lose a lot of games this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a legit shot they go 2-10 if the quarterback position isn't serviceable. It's a real shot that 2-10 is very possible.
Yeah,
That's
that
crazy.
Probably won't be 2-10, but they'll sneak 1 or 2 out. But I don't think they even get to 5 wins.
Yeah. Are we all in agreement on under on 5.5?
I'm under.
Yeah.
It would take nothing short of a miracle to hit 6 with this schedule and just that football team.
Yeah. That Georgia game is going to be a slaughter.
Oh, and Kirby will run the score up on them since it's Florida, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Shit.
You guys want to go ahead and jump to Georgia?
Yeah.
So their win total is 11.5.
Over.
I'm going over 2 just because like looking at the schedule, besides going to Knoxville, unless there's like a colossal upset, I don't see anyone beating them. It's gonna probably be another SEC title for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, they return 13 starters. They have Lad McConkey, who somehow is an elite receiver in the SEC. It makes really not much sense to me when I watch him play, but he's always open. He's like a Will Hastings on steroids. Brock Bowers, who's probably actually on steroids.
He's probably the best player in the SEC too, if you really break it down. Probably the best. So they've got him, obviously. Quarterback is unproven. They have Beck and what is
it won't matter, bro. They just won 2 back-to-back natties with Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to undermine what he did. It was still like good, but you don't need a magician back there to run that offense.
Yeah. They also got Rara Thomas in from Mississippi State, who's a wide receiver 1.
And Dominic Lovett from Missouri.
Yeah. He transferred.
It's just you can book 12 wins. You really can. If they're gonna drop one, who do you think it would be? At Tennessee?
If it wasn't at Tennessee, I could see Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Possible.
That's a tricky game. They don't play them ever.
And it's the week before Tennessee as well. So
yeah, overlook kind of game.
Yeah.
You know who I feel bad for is weird enough to say this, Georgia fans though. Like, I mean, look at this home schedule. You have besides South Carolina at home after September 16th, like going to those home games is going to be brutal besides maybe Ole Miss just to be interesting. All their good games are on the road. Auburn, Florida's neutral, and then at Tennessee. Just because those other two are rivalry games, the only reason I would consider them good games for the fan base.
Yeah, your biggest home games are South Carolina and Ole Miss, which are good, but it sucks too having like 4 straight home games as a student, and 3 of them are shitty. UT Martin, Ball State, and UAB. Like, no
Yeah.
one's gonna go to the UAB game because you've just gone 3 weekends in a row to home games. Like, and then you play UAB. That's just not anything to get the fan base excited.
No. And the only thing that derails this team is losing focus, but I don't think that'll really, like the Missouri game last year, where it was kind of like, holy shit, what is happening?
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen this year because, when you have success like this, you have people come in and they automatically think because I have this G on my helmet, we're going to win games. But Kirby's so good at gaslighting his team. Like, I don't think they'll have a problem hyping them up. He's like, these guys were telling us you were going to lose by 40 to UAB. And they were like, oh my God, they really did? Like, it's like they're brainwashed to Kirby.
Yeah, Kirby
does
is probably
really
the most
well.
elite gaslighter in America.
Yeah. He knows how to motivate those guys. The like speeches that get leaked from their practices and stuff. I mean, it's no wonder they destroy teams like they do. He lays into them and he gets them to believe. I mean,
I could see him and Muschamp just like shotgunning monsters before the pregame speech. Like walking there.
Is Muschamp still a assistant?
Like a co-DC now, I think.
they're
He's co-DC now.
Yeah.
But this will be, I think, I'm saying they're going to go undefeated. They're going to three-peat. So if they do that, they'll be just the second team since 1900, joining Minnesota, who won 3 straight from 1934 to 1936. Before 1900, you could go back and be like, oh yeah, Princeton won like 5 in a row or something when there was 3 college football teams. But you're going to see something that's, if they do it, that hasn't really been done in the modern era of football.
Yeah, that was when Swanee was like the best team in the SEC.
Yeah. And Tulane.
Yeah. You
Could
guys
be
got
any-
anything else on Georgia?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that pretty much covers it. Their schedule's always, I mean, it's always, no, everybody knows their schedule is weak, but they still dominate. It doesn't matter. I mean, once they get to the postseason, they dominate. They're Georgia.
Yeah. And to be fair, they did have to get the Oklahoma game taken away.
Oh,
by
yeah.
SEC.
I forgot about that one.
But still, overall, I mean, it's just one of those things where you're in the weaker division of the conference and now you're a perennial power. It's not your fault. It's kind of like
Even if they were still playing that Oklahoma game, I'd still have it at 12. They would destroy Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, they would ruin Oklahoma. They would injure half the team.
Okay, so that's it for Georgia, I guess. Kentucky.
So Kentucky Wildcats 2023, the win total is 6.5.
6.5. I'm saying under for them.
I don't know. I think they're gonna go 7-5. I'm gonna go over.
I've got
Just
over as
because
well.
This is one of those almost kind of you roll the dice with it kind of team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
their schedule, it's super backloaded. And I don't know, that's kind of a gauntlet right at the end is with Leary's kind of injury history. It's
Yes.
interesting to
It'll
see
be
if he can
dependent on
stay
that.
healthy. If he can stay healthy, they have a really good shot to go.
They could start 5-0. Like legitimately, they have the chance
yeah.
to do it. And then as long as Leary, I mean, they'll get Georgia will be ugly in Athens, but it's possible. But I think the reason that they go over is their O line might be one of the best in the SEC after it was god awful last year.
Yeah, I've got one reason that they're gonna go over, unrelated to anything with the schedule or the talent. And that is because Kentucky starts the Dingle brothers at tight end and fullback, Justice and Jordan. Justice is the fullback, Justice Dingle, and Jordan Dingle, the tight end.
Those are incredible names.
You can't have the Dingle brothers and not win 7 games.
The Dingle brothers might drop a few on some this year. So
They're both huge, and I found out about them today and have just been obsessed with the Dingle brothers ever since I looked at their depth chart. So no, but in all seriousness, Mark Stoops, he's a consistent coach. The schedule is super backloaded. Going to State and Alabama, then at South Carolina and Louisville, like you said. But I think Mark Stoops can get his team to 7 wins. Devin Leary's great. He is injury prone, like you said, Rod, and he's got terrible, shitty tattoos. But he was the 4th all-time touchdowns at NC State with 62, threw for over 6,800 yards. I mean, you can make an argument he's better than Levis was.
I think he is better than Levis.
I think he is
The only
too.
people who think Levis is good is Kentucky fans and now Titan fans who are trying to cope and convince themselves he's a good player.
Yeah,
And Will Levis.
I mean, the quarterback play at Kentucky is going to improve this year, I think, because of a combination of the O line being better is part of it, but
Mhm.
because Leary's simply a better quarterback than Will Levis.
So the guys they have is on the line. They have Eli Cox in 2021. He was projected to be an All-American by the middle of the year. He got hurt. He's back now. Kenneth Horsey was basically he was like predicted to be all SEC, and then he got forced to play left tackle last season in a really bad O line, but he's been kind of like the rock of that line. And then they have a all SEC freshman from last year as well, either Jaeger Burton, and they had 2 transfers, the NIU transfer Cox and a O-line transfer from Bama Bowles. So they could be one of the best O-lines in the SEC. The problem is I just don't know if they really have the weapons unless Leary raises the players around him from his play to boost off to like an 8 or 9 win season kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what it's going to take is if some of the younger guys at their skill positions step up and kind of grow into their roles and help Leary do what he needs to do to be successful.
Yeah. There's a serious chance they start 5-0 going into Georgia. I mean, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, at Vandy, Florida at home. I mean, with the way we all think Florida's going to be this year, that's 5-0.
Yeah, and then you hit the wall.
You catch Missouri at home. I don't feel strongly about Mississippi State, and then you can probably snag Louisville. I mean, I think they're over easily.
There's definitely a path. It's just if they get into that gauntlet and their season nosedives because of how difficult
Especially
it
if
is.
there's any injuries.
Yeah. So it's just going to be it's just going to be really all about injuries and how they handle that tough stretch. But it's possible.
Well, Mark, let's see what you can do. Moving on to another M. Missouri Tigers win total in 2023, 6.5.
I've got under.
Yeah, I think under 2.
This is this is like I think the hardest team in my opinion in the SEC to predict this year because if things do go correctly, you could look at 5-0 with LSU coming to town.
Yeah, I have
At
Kansas State. I have Kansas State circled. If they get past that game, then I will
dictates the
change my
season.
opinion on Missouri.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because Kansas State, I mean, they lost Deuce Vaughn, but they've got
They got Howard at quarterback.
Howard,
who's better than Martinez. Howard, who's better than Martinez. Better than Martinez, in my opinion, once he actually started cooking last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a growing star in the Big 12, and if they can get past him, Howard and Kansas State, I think there's a really good shot they're undefeated going into LSU.
Yeah, their wide receiver room is elite.
Yes,
Elite.
dude. Yes.
Luther
Elite.
Burton Jr.
If Lovett stayed, dude, they could have.
Yeah,
I would say they
unreal.
have the best receiver room in the SEC.
Yeah, Luther Burden, Theo Weiss from Oklahoma.
He was the number 3 player out of high school at wide
Yeah,
receiver.
the only question is Jake Garcia
Well, I don't think he'll start. I bet Brady Cook starts again.
really
the
he's
keeper-
from what I read, Jake Garcia is slotted to start, but it could be. I mean, there's still so much time.
I
There's
think it's
so much
because
time.
Sam Horn and Brady Cook both are coming off injuries. So I think it's helped Jake Garcia through spring brawl and everything getting to play. But I don't know. I feel like Cook was like all right last year. Plus whoever they pick at quarterback, I feel like it'll probably be best because they added Fresno State's Kirby Moore, the OC, who coached up Hayner at Fresno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jake Garcia played at a school in my hometown, so I'm kind of familiar with him.
Really?
Yeah, he was only at the high school in my town for about 2 weeks and then had to transfer because he got ruled ineligible. So there's a little bit of funkiness with around Jake
Who did
Garcia.
he play for? Rush
Like,
Props?
yeah, yeah, that was under.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was under Rush Probst. We love Rush Probst. We're Rush Probst podcast here. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, he was there, so I'm kind of familiar with him. He went down to Miami and now obviously at Missouri. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a good arm, former 4-star, not a 5-star, 4-star. But I don't know. There's just kind of I think it's a mental thing with him just to see if he can kind of come into the SEC and be successful. And I have my doubts about that. So we'll see.
I didn't
Yeah,
know.
he had to go from Miami. That quarterback room was just way too talented. He had to get out if he wanted to play. So I'll be interested to see how he does. From your description of him, Rod, he seems like he could be one of the more entertaining quarterbacks this year. Maybe not necessarily for his play on the field, but
He's a
maybe
very
some good
interesting-
quotes.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. That's what I'll say. So be on the lookout for Jake Garcia.
Okay, so this was cool. I didn't know with Luther Burden last year he had 8 overall touchdowns, and that was the most among all true freshman receivers in the country. And I think he was like second in overall touchdowns behind Judkins in the SEC. So that could, I mean, that wide receiver room, if the new OC gets it clicking and one of the quarterbacks can actually get it rolling, this team will be a lot better than people think. So this is what I have. So the season only goes 2 ways for Missouri. Either an 8-4, 9-3 miracle, or we see a 4-8, 3-9 season. That's it. That's the only 2 ways. Because if they get that Kansas State game, you're sitting at 5-0, and you're riding high, and you got LSU coming to town in like a little Tiger Bowl, and they're top 10 or something. You never know with college football. Just in that, I mean, I don't know with the momentum around Mizzou or something. If this is best case scenario possible, and then you could ride that to Kentucky, but then you hit the wall once you get to. I would say they lose to South Carolina, and then you have Georgia, then you have Tennessee, then you have Florida, which you could win, and then you go to Arkansas in a rivalry game, which will probably be a loss as well.
South Carolina, Georgia, and then Tennessee 3 weeks in a row is absolutely brutal. And they're at Kentucky the week before South Carolina as well. So that 4-week stretch, that month, October into November, is going to define their season.
Yeah, they absolutely have to nail the start of the year. They can't slip up at all. Weeks 1 through 5.
State game. The Kansas State game dictates the whole If they beat Kansas State, the miracle's alive. If they lose, it's going to get bad, and there's going to be another losing season for Drinkwitz.
Yeah. Ultimately, the reason I think under is I just don't believe in Drinkwitz. I really don't.
I have that exact thing written in my notes. Don't believe in Drinkwitz. I don't. I mean, Drinkwitz has done nothing at Missouri to impress me, and I think his time is limited.
The thing is just last year was a weird year because there was they could have easily finished 7-5 last year if they didn't choke the Georgia game. They should have beat us, Auburn. They should have beat us. That was the biggest choke job I've seen in a long time. Georgia game lost by 4. Florida, you lost by 7. Kentucky, you lost by 4. I mean, those were all winnable games. I think Drinkwitz is a good coach, and he's brought in some decent talent to Mizzou since their past glory days, I guess, of the early 2000s and late 2010s, or early 2010s. But I just don't know if I think Drinkwitz can be a successful football coach, but I don't think Missouri's the right place for that.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, Missouri right now seems like a really hard place to win.
Like, I could see Drinkwitz being a good Big 12 coach.
Yeah,
well, Missouri is like a Big 12 school, so.
Yeah, but they're playing a lot different teams than some of the Big 12 schools are playing.
We'll see. I mean, like you said, Matt, it's one way or the other for Missouri. They're just so unpredictable.
Let's get moving to the South Carolina Gamecocks. You guys love Beamer. Projected 6.5.
I'm gonna say over. And
I've got over.
I got over, and I guess that North Carolina game early season will be interesting, which it's neutral site, right?
Yeah, neutral site. That's a banger week 1.
Yeah, that's an incredible
awesome
game. I think all the Carolina schools should play each other out of conference every year, like them or North Carolina State and North Carolina alternate, and then you have like ECU or something too. But that Georgia game early. I mean, we've seen South Carolina's been the thorn in the side of the upsets for Georgia. Not predicting it's going to be an upset because I wouldn't do that, but if it was possible, like I wouldn't necessarily be super surprised. But the games that are there for them, the home games are winnable, and I think they could beat Clemson at home again this year.
Yeah, I see that for sure. I mean, it's really going to depend all on Spencer Rattler and how consistent he can be. If they can carry over the momentum from 2022, the way they ended last year, beating Tennessee, beating obviously Clemson, the way they did in Clemson, they will be really good this year. Not win the SEC good, because I don't think there's, if they did somehow upset Georgia, there would be a shot, but I don't see it. I don't. There's no
They
shot
would
they
turn
upset
around and
Georgia.
lose to Mississippi State the next week or
Yeah,
something like that, or then
yeah,
that 4-game stretch of Tennessee, Florida at Tennessee, Florida at Mizzou, at A&M is 3 away games in 4 weeks is rough.
yeah. It's tough. Their schedule's not easy by any means, but if they can be consistent and carry over from last year, they can hit 9 wins easily.
I agree. Week
I'm really
three,
surprised.
week 3 at Georgia is Georgia's first real home game too, because the first 2 are cupcakes, and that place is going to be, it's going to be insane to play in. I mean, you saw Tennessee fold there last year immediately. Spencer Rattler, like you
Oh
said,
God.
Rod, it's going to completely be on his shoulders. If his decision making can improve, I can see it. He throws a lot of interceptions. Obviously, a lot of people think he has an NFL arm. I don't know that I'm a big believer in that. I've seen him be touted as a Heisman dark horse. I also don't know if I believe in that.
Were
But
you reading the South Carolina message board or something?
yeah, I subscribe to the South Carolina, the Cox board. Um, but you guys love Beamer. I like Beamer. Building momentum. They've got the 9th overall class in 2024 already. If they have a 9-win season, I know we talked about this before, Napier gets canned. I could see him making the move too. So, I mean,
I tend to
Florida.
think, I don't know. We could see. I think he stays at South Carolina because I think they've got a really good thing going. And if you're good this year, I can't see him jumping ship. But I
Kinda
mean,
like
it's
one of those
possible.
places.
Florida would be really hard to turn down for him.
That's true because there's so many. I mean, you have Steve Spurrier at South Carolina as well, and I guess you can kind of like make your own way, kind of what Dabo did at Clemson, kind of made himself into Clemson's Jesus. Where if he stays at South Carolina and it works out, he can just be gushed all over.
I think, yeah, I think he stays. I think he'll make South Carolina his own. He fits there perfectly. His mentality and his attitude fits with what South Carolina's culture is. But for this year specifically, I think it's kind of the opposite of last year, how the beginning of their season didn't determine the end of it. I think the way they play at Georgia, not even win, I don't think they even have to win. I think if they keep that game close within 10 points, then that's a win for them. I think if they keep that game close, they can carry momentum for the rest of the year and have a really good year.
I think if they beat North Carolina and then beat Furman, because I'm going to imagine North Carolina is probably going to be ranked. So if they beat UNC and beat Furman, it'll be a top 25 matchup in Athens.
Mm-hmm.
for sure, that line would still probably be like 17 points for Georgia.
Yeah,
I think they beat North Carolina. I think North Carolina lost a lot. I mean, they lost Josh Downs. They lost a couple other key pieces from last year. So I do think week 1 is very winnable for South Carolina.
Yeah, Mac Brown is riding everything on Drake May just like he did last year to just carry his football team. And then you got washed up. We love you, Gene, but washed up Gene Chiswick DCing for him, just getting absolutely bodied every week. So
Yeah.
I'm taking South Carolina in that game and overall.
So I know you guys think highly of Beamer as a coach, but personally, what do y'all think about him as like just a dude?
He's a little like, so some of the stuff he tweets is a little like he's kind of a tryhard a little bit.
Oh, 100%. He does what he thinks is gonna work, like social media wise, and just feeds into it to try. It's like the gif of "What's up, fellow kids" or whatever with the skateboard on his back.
Yeah.
That's how he acts. But I hated Beamer like his first year, and I was like, they got lucky that everything lined up perfectly, which to be fair, it did that first year at the end of the season. And the next year I was like, they're not gonna do it again. And they did it again. So he kind of like, I mean, he's got a likable personality too. It's not necessarily I hated him. I just didn't like South Carolina, so I wasn't happy that they were having success. I just don't like their fan base. So, but I like him now, but that doesn't mean I like their fans. But I like seeing him be successful. It's fun the kind of energy he does bring to the locker room. But as a person, he's definitely corny.
Yeah, very corny. My favorite thing about South Carolina is the pregame sandstorm with the white towels and shit. I think that's super badass.
Overrated.
I like it. Did y'all see the thing that went viral this week of what they do with their mascot?
No.
So the mascot, the like actual like costume mascot, is kept a
Cocky.
secret. Cocky, yeah, great name.
Yeah.
And at graduation, the person that is cocky wears the feet of the costume when they walk, and then everybody finds out who the mascot was. So
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Cool. They have cool traditions. They're a very tradition rich program. I'd love to see them return to how they were in like the early 2010s.
Spurrier era, yeah.
Yeah, they end like
Well,
middle
the
of
thing is
that
with
part
South
of it.
Carolina is a program you can, when they do get it rolling, they can actually be competitive. Well, South Carolina, if you can build off it, you can make that a legitimate, like, good program.
Yeah. Yeah. South Carolina has all the resources and like they're in the right region for recruiting to where they can be good enough to compete for the SEC. Maybe not yearly, but every other year.
For sure.
Yeah. Definitely underrated environment, though. I don't like the fans, but the home field advantage is definitely one of the best in the country for South Carolina.
Moving on to another school that has an elite home field and home advantage, the Tennessee Volunteers,
My favorite stadium.
set at 9.5. Where do y'all have them?
This one's
Under.
tough.
Under.
Honestly, I'm going to go under just because of the 4-game slate they have mid or late September to throughout October. I just think that's tough. And then after that slate, which is the slate is South Carolina, Texas A&M at home, at Bama, at Kentucky, and then you got Georgia November 18th on top of that.
Yeah,
And
it's
UTSA, honestly, that's one of the best group of 5 teams who's probably going to be a conference champion. That could be a really, if things don't start too hot and they lose to Virginia week 1, if Joe Milton has like a bad game, I could see something weird happening.
yeah, I've got
They haven't lost
them.
teams before there.
I've got them under, but I got them at 9 wins. So just barely under. The major reason for that is 3 receivers return. You got Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, and Keaton.
Bro,
Keaton had a monster game against Alabama last year. And they returned both running backs, Jalen Wright and Jabari Small. So their offense, Joe Milton does not have to be a world beater. He just needs to not turn the ball over. I know everyone is touting his big arm and says like the way he ran the offense in the bowl game was even better than Hooker, which I don't agree with at all.
no, that was
But
fantasizing.
I just think, I mean, Milton's had a weird career starting at Michigan, getting run out of there. And I don't know how he's going to do with having the whole pressure of the team on his shoulders.
Yeah, well, even if
Yeah.
their offense is good, the problem is who are you going to stop defensively?
Yeah. And with the pace they play, their defense gets hung out to dry all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, their defense is a very, very weak point. I don't know. We talked about this the other day, but I think expectations. Heupel is awesome. I think he's a great coach, but the year that they had last year, I think expectations have been set a little bit too high. But that doesn't mean they can have a really good season this year. But I don't think Joe Milton will last the season. I he reminds me a little bit of like a Jeremy Johnson situation. I think it's very similar to that. So we'll see how it goes. But I think Nico Imanavele, if that's how you pronounce his name.
I was going to say, how many times did you practice that?
he plays at some point this year, and I think they get 8-4. I think they can win 8 games with that guy because I think
Honestly, I wouldn't hate that happening because building on to the next year, I think that kid's going to be an absolute animal.
yeah, I think he goes into 2024 as one of the top quarterbacks in the country, whether or not he's played or not. He's that type of talent. If you watch their spring game, and I know it's a spring game, but the guy looks like Trevor Lawrence. They've got the same build, very similar throwing motion. I mean, that's somebody who I think if Joe Milton struggles, I would not be surprised if you see Nico very quickly.
I agree. And he's going to be the first guy that Heupel's had that's like strictly a Heupel guy. Like Milton and Hooker both had baggage from other schools and different kinds of development. So, I mean, even if Milton plays the whole year, that guy coming in next season is going to be probably preseason Heisman picks. Looking at their schedule, Virginia, like you said, Matt, at Florida, I think they get past. And then there's that tough stretch. Alabama is going to be out for blood in Tuscaloosa this year. But I can still see them winning that game possibly. UConn, they're going to destroy. Missouri, they'll probably destroy. Georgia at home as a revenge game. I mean, I doubt they do it, but I mean, I think if Georgia will drop one, I could see it to be to Tennessee.
It just all depends on how their season's going. If they're good and if they go into the Georgia game with undefeated or with one loss, that is like one of the biggest games in the history of
Yeah, there'll be an elimination or a
it'll be
CFP
a playoff game. Yeah. So we'll see. It just all
I'm
depends on
excited.
how the season plays out.
I'm excited for that UTSA game.
Shut up.
It's an interesting one. If they drop that Virginia game, like you said, there is going to be a lot of pressure. A lot.
Yeah.
fun
So,
schedule, though.
Rod, what situation do you see where they bench Milton? What are you thinking? Like maybe if they drop Virginia and then look shaky against Florida, they go to him?
Yeah, I think so. If they lose to Virginia and he's playing poorly against Florida, even if they barely get by Florida with him, you could see them put in Nico against UTSA and say, okay, let's give it a shot.
Milton gets pulled when they're losing to UTSA, and Nico comes in and brings them back.
It's possible.
Yeah, and that would set up well because they got 2 home games right after, so you don't have to throw them into a hostile environment.
Yeah.
Get your feet under you right before you roll into Tuscaloosa.
It's just so hard to keep a talent like that on the bench. You know, as good as Joe Milton played at the end of last year in the bowl game, I mean, it's similar to me. It reminds me of like Kelly Bryant at the beginning of 2018 with Trevor Lawrence coming in. You're going to see Nico, however you say his name. I'll get it eventually. You're going to see him play some, even if Joe Milton's the full-time starter. It's just going to be they have. I don't know. I just don't know what to think about Tennessee. It's hard to tell with the type of guys they lost, like Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. How do you reproduce that?
It's tough. It's gonna be
It's
that's the
tough.
thing
Their
is-
defense is going to be very bad, I think. Again, so like it does. These guys we're talking about, it may not even matter. They probably, if they can't stop anyone, they're not going to win 10
Yeah,
games.
if they're giving up 40 a game, then their offense will break eventually.
No, that Bama game will probably be like a 38-31 kind of football game.
I'd love to see him win that game, though. It'd be
That'd be great.
yeah, it'd be amazing. I mean, I think they've lost 3 times in Tuscaloosa since 2010. I think that's right. I might be missing one, but I don't know.
They play every other year, so since 2010, it probably has to be more than 3 times since that was the first
No,
time.
I mean Bama's lost at home.
Oh, Bama's lost at home.
3 times since.
Oh yeah, they've only lost 3 in like a decade at home.
So I mean that would be monumental. And 2 years ago they played great on the road in Heupel's first year.
The
So
goal line fumble.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
but we'll see. I think Tennessee's got a lot going for them. It's just how the season plays out. It just depends.
Moving on to another elite offense in the SEC East, the Vanderbilt Commodores win total 3.5.
I got over.
Over 100% over.
We all have over.
Vanderbilt is one of 2 SEC teams with a returning head coach, OC, DC, and quarterback.
Yep.
Little fun stat.
4 games is not too much to ask. Hawaii sucks.
They could win 4 games the first 4 weeks.
I don't know
Yeah.
about at Wake, but you're right. They could. 4 games is not too much to ask. I think Hawaii, Alabama A&M, UNLV are all wins. I think they'll beat Florida in the Swamp.
Missouri's winnable.
Missouri's winnable.
Kentucky, if Leary gets hurt.
They just have to get the wins early. It gets tough after week 5. I don't have too much on Vanderbilt. A question I have for y'all: are we going to try to make the game in Nashville?
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah. Southern Draw will be in attendance for Auburn Vanderbilt in Nashville. Absolutely.
Gonna have to break the bank on some tickets to that game.
On a, we might be able to get front row tickets for like $3 or like first row. That'll be. But the thing that sucks is like if Vandy does win like 4 or 5 games, I just see us as being one of the teams that they beat.
I was gonna say that.
I'll never forget, like, was it like 2008 when they beat us at Jordan Hare when we wore those alternates for like the 75th anniversary or whatever?
Yeah.
It was like 9-7 or something. I can't even remember, but it was so bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say that depending on how Auburn is, the Auburn game is very winnable because it's at home for Vandy. But that depends on Auburn, I think. I mean, if Auburn's any good this year, I think Auburn wins that game. But there are plenty of wins, especially early in the season, like you were saying, Nick, for Vandy to get. They're gonna definitely get at least 4.
A sneaky win, I think, on here. They always play Ole Miss
Here it is.
close.
I knew he was gonna say it.
They always play Ole Miss close. I was talking to Duffy McCat earlier about the Vandy Ole Miss game, and he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna lose to Vandy." So I mean, if they get 4 wins early on, take Ole Miss down, I think that's a fantastic year for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, 100%. I
The
mean,
most-
they're not a total. I mean, they're still the basement dweller of the SEC, but they're slightly better than they have been. So,
Yeah, I mean, they have a coach who alumni, so like someone who truly cares about the university. So I think it's definitely going to be a project. Like it could take like 6 years to get to 7 wins, but I mean, it's Vandy, so if they win 4 games, it's like winning a national title.
yeah, I think they get 4. I mean, it's there.
The most random game I've ever seen in my life: Vanderbilt at UNLV.
That's crazy.
They went to Hawaii last year. They played a home and home with Hawaii.
Yeah.
That game was awesome.
Yeah,
They
that was
steamrolled them, and they were so happy. It was so funny watching them celebrate beating one of the worst teams.
You think
It's
there's going to be
you
a
really never see Vandy happy either. You just see them getting just destroyed. So it's
Watching
like an
Anthony,
odd thing to see.
Anthony Orgy was just ruining the Rainbow Warriors. That was when I first heard about him last year. That game, he probably had like 14 or 15 tackles.
You
Yeah,
think there's going to be a large contingency of Vanderbilt alumni making the trip to Vegas, just doing the whole weekend out of it? They're like counting cards at the
They
casinos.
fit right in Vegas, huh?
They don't even go to the game. They watch it in the casino. All right, now shifting over to the West, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide 2023 win total 10.5.
Under.
I knew it. Oh, see, this is so if you're my question is for your under, are you saying still 10?
I'm saying 9.
9?
I think 9 or 10. My reasoning is the quarterback room is a shit show. It truly is. We've touched on Buckner still being average but familiar with the offense. I think the reason I have them under for sure, because I think there are 2 losses out of Texas, Ole Miss, A&M, Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn. There are 2 losses there.
Yeah, I agree. I think Texas beats them early.
They should have beat them last year.
Yeah, they should have. And I think I'm really high on Ewers this year, and I think he goes into Tuscaloosa and has like a statement game. Johnny Manziel-esque.
Chad Kelly-esque.
Yeah. Big time statement game early for Texas. And then the Iron Bowl is in Auburn this year, and they notoriously struggle to play in Jordan Hare.
So that's two right there.
We just struggle to play on the road now, period, in this new era of I guess our new era of college football. Alabama on the road is more vulnerable than they've ever been. I think that when I say under two with a 10-2 season, but I don't think it's the Ole Miss game out of the Mississippi schools. I think it's at Mississippi State, sandwiched between Ole Miss and at Texas A&M, because you got some veteran players at Mississippi State. Ole Miss is just kind of like Lane Kiffin's not going to beat Nick Saban. Saban owns him. Texas A&M though, I think it's one of those overlooked things like we were talking about earlier. I see going into Starkville could be a little rowdy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was just looking at that too. I mean, they usually beat up on Mississippi State, but defensive minded head coach. They've got Will Rogers. I think this is Will Rogers' fourth year. I mean, their offense is going to be still similar to what Leach ran, but a little bit different. But fourth year quarterback at home, it's a big time trap game.
The talent just doesn't scare me like it usually does. Like their starting running back's going to be Jace McClellan most likely. I mean, he's good. He's just not a running back one like Gibbs or Brian Robinson were the past few years. One thing Alabama does have going for them, their DBs are going to be really good. Kool-Aid's back, Malachi Moore. I mean, they're going to be good. It's Alabama. It's Nick Saban.
Yeah, they're still going to be a good football team.
I think 10 wins, 9 to 10 wins is a realistic expectation for the guys they have in the quarterback room right now.
But I do think I have them losing 3 games for the first time since 2010 because I have them winning the West at 10-2, then losing to Georgia. So it makes them 10-3. And then the bowl game, depending on who they get in that New Year's 6, most likely, could be interesting, the difference between a 4-loss season or an 11-3 season. And if it's a 10-4 season with a bowl loss, the fans are going to freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
it's their weakest team since in a long time that I can remember. Like you said, Nick, there's really no one that overly impresses me on their offense, which I can't remember the last time I said that.
Yeah, I think Ja'Cory Brooks is going to have a really good year. But their second best receiver is going to be Jermaine Burton.
And he's horrible.
Yeah, I don't think highly of him at all.
But the interesting game though will be bringing LSU at home and Tennessee back to. Well, I guess there's a bye in between that, but that's crazy back-to-back home games, I guess, with a bye sandwich in, of course. But those are going to be 2 good teams, and if their offense is flat this year, it's going to be hard to hang with offenses like that. Especially Brian Kelly did it last year. Why not do it again? And it's not like they've ever really struggled playing in Tuscaloosa.
No,
but it will be Kelly's first trip to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, they're good. They're good in Tuscaloosa. A weird one to me is, when's the last time they played Kentucky?
Yeah, at Kentucky.
Yeah, making the trip to Kroger Field.
The worst.
They played Kentucky a couple years ago, but I can't remember the last time it was at Kentucky. It's been a long time. That's like Auburn and playing in Knoxville. I mean, it's like 10 years in between. But
let's see. Oh my God. Alabama's 38-1-2 all time against Kentucky. The last time they played in Lexington was 2013.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
But Kentucky's last win was in Lexington in 1997, 40-34.
There we go. Yeah, Rod, that was spot on, because what was the last time Auburn played Knoxville? Was 2013 or 2014?
2013.
2013?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, I will give them credit, because in the past I've dogged on them. It's actually a difficult schedule this year with Texas at the beginning like that. It's a very respectable schedule this year, and usually Alabama's schedule is horrendous. So,
and you have Kevin Steele. Saban probably didn't even let him do spring. He's probably been making him prepare for Middle Tennessee State after that game at Miami last year for this entire summer. It's probably like, you will not let these people throw for 400 something yards on us at home.
Yeah.
Imagine the freak out if Middle Tennessee, obviously they're not going to win.
Puts up
go in there and put up a bunch of yards with Texas coming in the next week. Their fans will lose their shit.
Well, with all the issues going on lately, I won't be surprised if there's a Steele scandal or something out of Tuscaloosa. Kevin Steele's trying to undermine Nick Saban to be the predecessor at Alabama.
Yeah.
Stop the steal 2.0.
Stop the steal. And like you said, all that to say, most likely West champions, Alabama.
Yeah.
The
They're
West,
I think they're definitely still the strongest team. I think the West is just weak this year overall,
I
but
think the West was weak last year too, and I just think these past few years, the West just has kind of been flat compared to what it normally is in the East. In the East, it's kind of weird. You got a bunch of teams with upward trajectory, but you kind of do in the SEC West as well. But you have more solid, like true identities that are already formed in the East than you kind of do in the West right now. Because you got a bunch of new. Well, you got Mississippi State new, you got Auburn new, LSU. Brian Kelly's only in year 2. Lane Kiffin's still early in his Ole Miss days. I mean, it could obviously it can easily get back to where it was, which it will, but it's definitely weak. But the problem is when you have a team like Alabama, usually you got to capitalize on the years like this when they're down for teams to take the West, which is kind of what LSU, not trying to take anything away from LSU, but it's kind of what happened last year, and they need to try to do that again. They're really the only team I think that'll contend with them for the West. So
Yeah.
it'll be
Now
be
that I think about it, LSU could win the West.
yeah, it just depends on that game in Tuscaloosa. I think LSU is going to be really good this year, and we'll talk about them later. But
it'll be interesting if they beat LSU but already have one loss, and that's like LSU's first loss in conference or something, and then they have to come to Jordan Hare to clinch the SEC West or some kind of scenario like that. That would be wild.
yeah, that would be crazy. It's happened in the past. We'll see. Okay, so our next team, Arkansas, their total is set at 7.5. What do we think?
Under.
Under.
I'm under 2.
Too much turnover, I think. I mean, they've brought in good players. Like they've had a good transfer portal for Arkansas. Like they've had a good transfer portal. I just don't know if it's gonna have to piece it all together. The schedule's not easy. You had a ton of turnover on the coaching staff, like I said, but obviously you have KJ Jefferson, who's a great player. I just don't know if there's enough weapons around him besides Sanders.
Yeah, KJ Jefferson's gonna have to carry. Rocket Sanders, I think, is maybe the second best running back in the SEC. But besides those two guys, the roster is really not too inspiring. KJ Jefferson is going to have, if they want to have a successful or a successful season and win more than 8 or 9 games, KJ Jefferson legitimately will have to have a Heisman campaign kind of season.
Yeah, that's what I had. I mean, he's got to step up. It's like people have been waiting for him to take the next step in his development. He has all the tools. He's got the frame. He's got the arm. He can run. I mean, he has it all. He just has to take the next step. And it just remains to be seen if he can do that or not. And he certainly, like y'all said, does not have the supporting cast that leads me to believe that he's going to be able to take the next step.
That's the problem. It's kind of limited for him. It's not like he can boost, especially when you're playing this schedule. I mean, you got two gimmies to start the year, should be gimmies. You got BYU at home, which isn't necessarily an easy game. That could be a slip up. You go to LSU, and then listen, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 straight games away because Texas A&M's neutral, so you'll be playing Jerry World, and then you go to Ole Miss, to Alabama. That's 4 straight weeks on the road. That's
It's absolutely a brutal schedule right now.
I don't know how that's even like allowed, to be honest. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, and then you have State at home, and then you go straight to the Swamp after. It's not like you don't get your stretch of home games till the last 3 weeks, and
they have one home game over like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, one home game. Wow.
Yeah,
That's wild.
Yeah, that's absurd. I mean, and their 2 hardest games, LSU and Alabama, are away. I mean, it's their schedule is not favorable at all. I mean,
Honestly, all their hard games are away.
I think like I said, I mean, I'm big on like losses compounding on top of each other. If they lose LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, and then get hit by Alabama, I could see them losing from LSU to Auburn in November and then finally playing Florida International and getting a win. But they could lose, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, like 6 or 7 straight. I mean, that's very possible.
It's
There's
just I
there's
think
so many teams in the SEC West who are kind of floating around where Arkansas is that someone's got to decline. Someone's got to lose these games, and I think Arkansas is one of the more likely teams to kind of have a bad season and decline.
Yeah.
And Sam Pittman it's kind of a make or break year for Sam Pittman. I know he fits Arkansas. He's like a perfect coach for Arkansas, but I don't know. I think it's a big season for him.
Let me
I've,
get off. Look, I said at the beginning of 2022, I told y'all that Sam Pittman was fraudulent.
I defended him.
Shit on for it. Y'all shit on me for it.
I mean, I think he's a good coach for Arkansas, but I think that year they had, was it 2021, that it just took the whole fan base and even, I guess, the administration kind of, they're an easy fan base to like manipulate, I guess, like through the actual university. Because like Arkansas is one of the most like crazy rabid fan bases that loves their school. So I think it kind of overblew the expectations of Arkansas. I mean, it's still a traditionally good school, but this is a school that caps out like on a great season. Like a 9-win season is equivalent to like 11-win season for some other schools.
Well, they're easy to manipulate because they had Chad Morris as their head coach. Chad
Yeah,
Morris
it's kind
is
of
one
hard
of
to do worse than
Their
that.
fans were still crazy before that.
I know, but if you go from Chad Morris to anyone, you're gonna love them.
Chad Morris is a legend.
Would you rather have Chad
for
Morris or
ruining
Brian
Arkansas.
Harsin as your head coach?
I'd rather have Brian Harsin to be than Chad Morris. Chad Morris helped Arkansas not climb to the next level. To be honest, those 2009, 2010 were scary years of Arkansas football.
I don't know. I
The
think
national championship race was it 2009
yeah.
or was it 2011?
I think that Sam
LSU.
Pittman is a really good guy. He's very much a player's coach. I really like him as a person, but I mean for what Arkansas, like you said, 9 wins is good for them. There's not 9 wins here.
No,
I'm not sure if
someone's got to
there's
lose.
I'm not sure if there's even 6 wins on this schedule. I mean, it's going to be a rough year for Arkansas, in my opinion.
The thing is, I think Pittman, a good way to maybe describe him now, like he gave him that year and everything, and they had good transfers in, and KJ flourished. But now, if they have another kind of downish year, which honestly, I think with this schedule, they shouldn't freak out too much. But Pittman's kind of like sitting in a spot right now where like, oh my God, we love Sam Pittman. He's so great. Like we love it. He's like a mascot almost for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
don't know.
I agree with that.
If I was them, I would not move on from him after this year, even if they do have a bad season. I think he's deserving of 1 or 2 more years. But if they're bad over the next couple years, I could see a change happening. It's just hard to move on from somebody who kind of embodies your program like he does.
Beamer to Arkansas.
0
That would be wild. Maybe Brian Harsin will come out of retirement and go coach the Razorbacks.
I
I'd
would
love
wish
that.
that.
Kick his ass every single year. That'd be amazing.
Oh, speaking of Brian Harsin, the Auburn Tigers win total 6.5 for the 2023 schedule. Boys, I'm going to guess the unanimous answer here is over.
Yeah, over.
Hammer the over.
This is coming from a complete unbiased standpoint of fandom. But to be fair, the people who obviously are going to do under, and the win total, I think, is a fine set. But this is one of the reason I think it's not just the freeze thing of people overhyping that. If you really get down to it, this is one of the easiest Auburn schedules in years, maybe even over a decade. So I think that's why everyone, mainly Auburn fans, think that it'll be the over from 6.5.
Yeah, it's such an easy schedule. I mean, starting out the year
is funny we say that.
UMass and then Cal. It's at Cal, but it's Cal. So I'm not concerned about Auburn winning at Cal. And then you have Samford.
Southern
My first-
Draw might be in Berkeley.
Southern Draw
A
may.
possibility we might be
Yeah.
in Berkeley.
There are some rumblings that Southern Draw will be making a trip to the great state of California. What would you call it that?
Yeah.
I don't know, but we may be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
playing my boys from New England, week 1, UMass. Week 1 through 3, you should be 3-0. Going to Texas A&M week 4 is really a huge test, and it's going to kind of see where Hugh Freeze has the program. Big road test in College Station. Auburn historically does well there. It's a good chance to start 4-0 until you take Georgia at home. I don't like Auburn's odds. Georgia, LSU, probably going to drop both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Death
I
Valley
think
is not.
I think a win for Auburn would be keeping both of those games close. Like I said with South Carolina earlier, if you keep Georgia close at home and then keep LSU close on the road, that can give you something to be positive about going into the rest of the schedule. Because you have right after that, you have the Mississippi schools at home back to back, and then at Vandy. So that's 3 wins right there that are those are very winnable games right there to kind of get back on track.
I love our away games this year. The fact that we got Vanderbilt and Arkansas, I mean, they are back to back, but those being 2 of our away games is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brand new roster essentially, especially on the
totally
offensive
flipped it.
side of the ball. We touched on Peyton Thorne signing Jarquez Hunter. I think he's 3rd or 4th best running back in the SEC preseason. Obviously, Judkins is 1, and I told y'all I think highly of Rocket Sanders. Best offensive line Auburn's had in God knows how long. Brought in a ton of guys: Dylan Wade, Avery Jones, Tutal Miller, Gunnar Britton. The weak point of Auburn this year is going to be the defensive line. I think lots of guys left. The pass rush could be a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Secondary is solid. Linebackers they'll be okay, but
They'll be improved, but
yeah,
they'll still
improved.
be like a C plus or a B.
Yeah. D line is the big weak spot. It's the biggest weak spot Auburn has. Offense really the last couple of years has been horrible. Everybody knows how bad Auburn's offensive line would be. I mean, Freeze has, like you said, Nick, like totally flipped offensively. I sent you all the stat earlier today that they added almost 12,000 snaps through the transfer portal or some other method on offense, which is just crazy. But yeah, Auburn is going to have good QB play, and they're going to have to score points because teams in the SEC are going to run all over that defensive line.
It's funny because like we were saying how easy of a schedule this is, but if you actually look at it, it's like a hard schedule. But that just has been how hard our schedules have been in the past. But this is weird. I had this thought earlier because I hate to do like comparisons like this, and just like thinking of 2013. You go to that with us, you go to A&M, and you have that it game that kind of made people believe. You know what I mean? They're like, oh shit, we have a competitive football team. I was like, what if maybe that's the Texas A&M game in 2023, a decade later, exactly 10 years.
Not saying it's going to be a 2013 type year, but
No. I meant just that game specifically.
that game, yeah, I like that. I think it's kind of a prove it game to kind of silence some people who are critical of the hire. If you can go into College Station, because they're kind of reeling right now. If you can go in there and get a win and
We
set
beat
yourself
them.
up, it'll be good.
Jimbo will they will be so mad because that'll set the tone for the rest of the Aggie season.
It's really a tone setting game for both Auburn and A&M, honestly. But we'll see. I like how the roster's looking. I think Auburn is going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, it's the problem with bringing in all these guys is it looks good on paper, but until we really see it employed, not going to be too sure how it looks. The good thing is with Peyton Thorne is he has experience playing in hostile environments. So you don't really have to worry about throwing out a guy who maybe the moment will be too big for them. The offensive line, like I said, is going to be great. Hopefully, I mean, on paper, it's a great offensive line. So Peyton Thorne thrives with a good running game. I know that Justin Ferguson tweeted out, I can't remember what the stat was, but Peyton Thorne with a good running game when they had Kenneth Walker was a completely different quarterback.
Yeah, the
Um,
play action opens him up a lot.
It was he was 16-1 as a starter at Michigan State when they rushed for 150 yards or more.
Yep, that's what it was. So you've got a stable of running backs, experienced quarterback, receivers with upside. Obviously, a couple of the guys are coming from smaller programs and weaker talent levels, but
Better than what we had.
7 games, 8 games, or 7 wins or 8 wins. And it's a great year for Hugh Freeze and Auburn. Make a bowl. And like you said, Rod, with Georgia and LSU games, it's in the first year of a head coach, it's really about eye tests and how the team is playing. And if you're improving from week to week, you're not seeing the things that Auburn fans have seen the past few years with offenses stagnating and just generally being horrible.
Especially on the road.
It just has to, in some of these games, it just has to not be bad football, because you can look at a team and tell they're playing bad football. Just put a good product on the field and keep it close, and that's success for Auburn in year 1 under Freeze.
I'll say, I got 7-5. There will be a game that they end up losing that probably shouldn't. That just happens. But I would say 7-5, ceiling 9-3. That would be dependent on the sweeping the Mississippi games.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for Auburn, but Auburn tends to do Auburn things, so I suspect a couple dropped games.
Yeah, even at Liberty, Hugh Freeze had a tendency to drop some games he really shouldn't have. So, obviously a different job and one that Hugh Freeze really, really wanted. So we'll see maybe if that trend continues with him, but 7 wins, good season.
Speaking of Tigers, LSU 2023 win total 9.5.
I have this listed in my notes as over with a question mark.
Over with a question mark.
Yeah.
I want to say over 2. I think they get 10. I think they go 10-2.
I do under, but at 9-3.
So
that Florida State game, man, is wild.
Yeah, so Florida State week 1 is crazy. Obviously, the first thing when you talk about LSU is Jaden Daniels. He has a lot of hype. He had a very good season last year. He's a dynamic quarterback. Proved it a lot with his arm this past season. I think he surprised some people with his ability to throw the ball. Wide receiver room is good. Neighbors is back. I mean, he had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. O-line is great. Running back room doesn't really – there's not a guy where you're like, wow, this guy's a stud. But you've got Josh Williams, Noah Cain, the guy who came in from Penn State, and Armani Goodwin. Those are 3 very serviceable running backs in the SEC.
It'll be a committee. But
yeah,
it'll be
definitely by committee.
I think they got they hit the lottery on speaking. Well, I mean, one of them's Bama, but like SEC away games, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Bama. That's an incredible draw.
If you can get past Florida State and pull out Florida State, it's really not. I mean, it's still the SEC West, but it's not a hard, overly difficult schedule compared to what they've played in the past. I mean, you have to go to Bama, obviously. But we don't think Florida's going to be good, but you still don't have to go to the Swamp. They get Florida at home. You get Arkansas at home. You get Auburn at home. I mean, get past Florida State, and there's a good shot that their only loss in the regular season might be to Alabama.
They will have to be careful, though. The Arkansas, that game's always chippy.
Yeah,
it's just that game. That's one of those games. The Golden Boot, insanely underrated rivalry.
That game gets funky. Also, the rivalry A&M game is always funky. Obviously, the 7 overtime game is famous, but
I hate that game. It ruined overtime. They made the rule.
Yeah, they did ruin overtime.
Last year, A&M won last year. LSU had an outside shot at the playoff before that game. I mean, they weren't going to beat Georgia, obviously, but people talked about it at the time.
No, I love. I talked to some people last week, and it's funny listening to people talk about LSU. They're like, yeah, they had a great season, but they weren't good. Like Georgia beat the hell out of them. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean they didn't have. That's like saying TCU didn't have a good year. It's just like I hate those kind of fans with things. They're like they only compare like every like Ball State could go like 10-2, and you're like, oh, Ball State's a pretty good football team. Like, yeah, but if you put them on the field against Georgia, they'd lose by like 60. And I'm like, well, no shit, Sherlock. They can still have a good season. So I think that's how some people kind of outside still view Brian Kelly a little bit, even though he basically made everyone shut up last year, in my opinion, of people who actually know ball. So I think you're right though with Florida State. That game dictates the 10 win mark
Yeah,
for both
100%.
schools.
That
honestly.
game, I think that game is really one of the most important games in the entire
season.
scheme of like the whole scene of the entire season. I think there's a real shot whoever wins that game can possibly make the playoff, especially Florida State. But obviously, we're talking about LSU. But it's such a tone-setting game for the year. I mean that's two. I think LSU is going to be an elite team this year, and that's two elite teams.
Do you think that'll be a top 10 matchup preseason wise, like going
Yes.
LSU Florida State game?
100%, yes.
Yeah,
That's-
it
I
could
was
be like a
thinking that
top
too.
6 matchup from some of the stuff I've seen on preseason rankings.
Yeah.
That game's gonna be.
I think it's likely like an 8 versus 7, 8 versus 6 game. But I mean, still, I really love both Florida State and LSU. I'm very excited to watch that
I
game.
just wish it wasn't neutral site. Like if they were
Yeah.
going to Doak Campbell, that would be insane because
That'd be
they're in
awesome.
Orlando, right?
Yeah, it's like the Camping World one, right?
Yeah, where they have the bowl game.
Yeah.
Dang, that sucks, dude. LSU and Doak Campbell will be wild. You'd have an elite uniform matchup in one of the coolest stadiums. Oh, that would be sexy.
Yeah. Yeah, the neutral sites are, I mean, they're fun, but just seeing these like traditional like programs go into other places, like well, we all went to Happy Valley when Auburn played up at Penn State. That was just so cool to see. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Just-
like the home and home obviously way better than neutral site, but I get it. It's a money maker and it's a little bit more in sites like Atlanta when people play there, which is obviously a hot spot for a ton of games. It's easy for fans to get into Atlanta. So
Yeah.
it makes it available for some people who may not be able to travel for the home and homes, but obviously home and homes are just way better.
I bet the tailgates are going to be wild at that game in Orlando. You
Yeah.
got two rowdy ass fan bases going together. That'd be a fun game to go to.
that
I
game
can't wait for that. I think the Ole Miss game could be interesting though on that schedule. That's just one of those that really
at
be.
Ole Miss.
Yeah, I don't know.
They don't need to
feel
be
like that could
sleeping on that game. I mean, that could trip them up.
They got. I mean, that's because you'll have 3 away games in a span of 4 weeks, and that'll be in the sandwich in the middle of it at the third.
Yeah, we'll see. 10, 11 wins is very possible. I think the over is a safe bet for LSU.
Shout out Brian Kelly. I'm still going the under at 9, but so Nick, what did you have over or under?
I am split. I'm gonna go with my
Your
gut.
question mark?
I'm gonna say over.
Over.
Okay.
Moving on. The Mississippi State Bulldogs, 6.5 win total for 2023.
Under.
Under.
I'm going over. I'm going 7. I think they'll win 7 games. I like Will Rogers. I believe in him. I think Arnett's defensive mind will help this team.
So I like Rogers. A good thing about Mississippi State, they have 4 starting offensive linemen coming back.
Yeah, that's
And
huge.
an elite quarterback.
Yeah, he is.
Here, sir.
Will Rogers is very, very, very underappreciated. Nationally, he gets like no recognition, but the way he plays quarterback, he's a very good quarterback.
He's accurate as hell. I mean, you got 2. That Arizona game though isn't one to necessarily sleep on. That could be weird, but it is a tough. I mean, LSU at South Carolina and then Bama at home. That's a brutal 3-game stretch.
It's a really hard schedule.
But
And then
I
they're
have I
They're
think
at
they'll upset.
Arkansas and at Auburn as well, and at Texas A&M. It's a really hard schedule.
I think they beat A&M. They've been having their number. I
Yeah.
think they'll beat them.
I
And
can
then
see that.
Kentucky as well, and then obviously you have Southern Miss, and then I think they'll beat Ole Miss as well.
Yeah, Arnett, defensive guy. They only have 4 defensive starters returning, so it's going to be a new defense. I think he'll get them right. I just think first year head coach, everything that happened with Mississippi State and Mike Leach. I don't know. I think under. I think 6 wins, make a bowl. Will Rogers is great. I think he's a really good quarterback, like y'all do. It's just going to be weird going from the offense that they were running. Obviously, they're probably going to try to keep a lot of the things that were in place there. But I mean, it's not going to be like a typical Mike Leach run team, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah,
like KJ Jefferson, where you're kind of capped within the program that you're at.
I saw something where they said they in the new offense they have Will Rogers taking snaps under center, so it is going to be a lot different.
Oh, let's go. Real football.
Yeah, it's
I
going
like
to
to
be
see it,
very
Arnett. That's what I'm talking about. I do hate Mississippi State, though. I will say that. Like, I am an avid hater of Mississippi State.
Yeah,
I-
when
I
we
can't
went to
stand
Starkville and lost to them, we left Starkville that night.
Yeah,
were
we
just like,
left immediately after the game and drove back and got back at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Right?
yeah. I was just like, I could not stand to be in Starkville for another second longer. Let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah, that
It's a
place is
special place.
it's like another world. But I don't know. I just see under. I agree with you, Nick. I think 6-6 is probably very likely.
I'm going the over with 7. I think they'll play more defense than they ever did under Leach with Arnett at the helm. Like, they'll actually try to play defense. I don't know. I like Arnett, and I can't believe I'm saying this about them. But I like Will Rogers, and I think they'll hit the over. But I hate you, Mississippi State. Speaking of another Mississippi school, Ole Miss win total 7.5 for the year of 2023.
Under.
I got over.
I got over as well.
Yeah, I think they lose at Tulane,
I do
And-
too. I think they get beat there as well.
and then I'm not trying to hate on them, but I think they're going to be looking ahead to Bama, and I think they could trip up against Georgia Tech, and I think the beginning of the year could get really ugly for Ole Miss.
So
I think they pick it up at the end, but I don't know. It's a really hard schedule. I'm not going to lie.
So, Rod, in that scenario, if you drop Tulane and look sketchy against Georgia Tech, do you think they go away from Dart?
Yeah, I would.
So, if you go away from Dart, are you going to Spencer Sanders or are you going to Walker Howard?
Howard. I would go to Walker Howard.
I'd go to Howard as well.
I would definitely go to Howard.
Spencer Sanders transferred, in my opinion, to learn from Lane Kiffin and become a coach. I think it's between Dart and Howard, honestly. But yeah, if you lose to Tulane and look bad against Georgia Tech, you got to do something.
If worst case scenario happens, it could get ugly.
Yeah,
Pratt could light up that Ole Miss defense.
they beat USC last year in the bowl game. Came back.
Yeah,
and
but the thing is with those group of 5 teams, though, people never pay it. They always think it's that one solid year, and then like the team kind of dissipates as a whole.
yeah,
And,
I think Tulane will be good again this year.
oh yeah, tougher conference. Or
Yeah.
no, they're still in the American. Tougher. There's teams coming into the American, but as a whole, it'll still be tough for them with UTSA coming in. But you're looking at a potential conference champion in week 2 at their place at, I believe it's Yeoman Stadium.
So, all of the things about Ole Miss's downfall, I level back because of Quinshon Judkins. I mean, he's going to be the best running back in the SEC. He's going to probably be the best running back in the country. Lane Kiffin always has dominant run
Blake
games.
Corum die?
I think Judkins is better than Corum personally.
Oh my god.
No,
I love
Kiffin-
Judkins.
Kiffin,
I do too, but I don't think he's better than Corum.
well,
Or maybe Braylon Allen.
that's a discussion for a different day. But Kiffin always has elite run games. I think they're going to ride Judkins. They lost Mingo and Malik Heath, and they obviously just dismissed the 5-star from A&M. They got Trey Harris from La Tech. He's a pretty good receiver, had 10 touchdowns last year. It's just going to be, Ole Miss is one of those teams where you really just can't look at them on paper and kind of get a feel for what they're going to be. You're going to have to see how they play in that Tulane game. And like y'all said, if it goes downhill and they lose, things could spiral. But if they go in and just beat their ass, then they could have a great season. Something with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, you see it every other year. Is you obviously saw it last year with ties to Auburn. Is he going to stay committed to them all year? Is he, if there is another position open
Florida.
where if Napier gets canned, Lane Kiffin wants to come back to Florida, will he come out and make a statement? Like last year, all the fans were begging him to just be like, no, I'm not going to Auburn. I'm staying at Ole Miss. But that never came out.
Bro, he doesn't care about those fans like that. Lane's Lane. He will not make a statement, I don't think.
I think he would have to this year. The fan base would revolt.
University forces him.
If it happened again, he would have to say something. But I mean, I don't know. It'll depend on how the year's going too. Because if they're bad, there's not going to be the same kind of hype around his name as it was last year. But I do think you're right, Nick. You ride Judkins and you can win a lot of games. I'm not trying to shit on Ole Miss. I just think as long as Judkins stays healthy, they have a shot in every game they play.
I think their run game's too lethal. That's why I'm going with the over.
I think the schedule. The only reason I think that 6-6 is possible for the under is because of how hard their schedule is. Because it's just a really hard schedule.
Yeah, though I give them the game against us just because of our defensive line outlook.
I would say that too. I think they probably do us.
They'll run all over us.
Judkins gets through that first level so easily, like with just how we are right now. And then we have an all right group of linebackers, so I could see him getting back through that second level. And then I just see that being it was the same thing last year. We were able to score on them, but they just lit us up in the run game.
Yeah.
Depending on how things go, if they're rolling and things are clicking and looking good, Georgia, I mean, I don't think they'll do it, but if things are going right, I could see them taking Georgia down.
Yeah, I think they lose early in the year to Bama, but if they are good and rolling, they're going to give Georgia a real game at the end of the year, a real game.
I would say they start 3-2 with losses to Bama and LSU, but then you could think you'd be 4-2, beat Arkansas, 5-2, beat Auburn, 6-2, beat Vandy, 7-2, beat A&M at home, and then if you do pull that upset against Georgia and you're 8-2, the committee will favor you being an SEC team with 2 losses. They would be like 7 or 6 in the country probably.
Yeah, 100%.
And then all you have to do is not mess up.
Yeah. Yeah, and if that's the scenario and they beat Georgia and then go to Starkville, that would be very scary.
Oh man.
Dude,
that would be terrifying.
On Thanksgiving.
You could find yourself as like the 5 or 6 team, and then Bama's probably going to the West because they beat you. And then you're kind of in that situation that exists now with this 14 playoff where maybe it's not better. It's better to be in, obviously, but you're the 5 or 6 sitting out waiting for these teams to lose, and Bama's probably going to lose to Georgia. But are you going to move Ole Miss in front of Bama or something? But this is like best case scenario, obviously, not saying Ole Miss is making the playoff. It's fun hypotheticals.
It'd be interesting to see. They're a very unpredictable team. I actually probably think y'all are right, but I don't know. It's just the disaster scenario makes me think,
It's the perfect embodiment of Lane Kiffin, man. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah. That's just how he is. I mean, he's a very I mean, we all wanted him at one point last year. I mean, he's a fun, if nothing else, you're going to be entertained whether your team's good or not when Lane Kiffin's your coach.
Yeah. I heard that talking about our friend Duffy McHat, little Oxford guy himself, I heard he went to Kiffin's house one time and then left at 1:00 in the morning because he had to leave. He couldn't spend the night.
Did he do that? Huh. Who would do something like that? That's horrible.
I don't know.
We got to talk to Duffy about these things.
Yeah, Duffy's got some serious problems we got to fix.
Get his shit together, man. He's out there with his farm, though, so we're happy for him.
We're moving on to Texas A&M Aggies. Win total 7.5 for the 2023 season.
Under.
Under, big time under.
I'm going over.
Over. What?
There
Their
are
defense
not,
is elite. Their defense is good. Like they were a great defense last year, and I feel like the offense just cannot be as bad as it was last year. The talent that is good is still there. Like that is just a team. The problem is, and I feel like I'm probably wrong going over because I think Jimbo Fisher is one of the most overrated coaches in the history of college football. If he can just relinquish a little bit, he'll be fine.
there are not a lot of teams I'm lower on than Texas A&M this year. You just said if Jimbo relinquishes it, well, guess who he's relinquishing it to? Fucking
Better than
Bobby
him-
Petrino,
better-
dude.
It's
Bobby
better than himself.
Petrino.
It's better than Jimbo. Almost
Is it?
Yeah, I think it is.
I don't know.
Ultimately, at the end of your day, or at the end of the day, your quarterback is Connor Wegman. He showed improvement through the end of last season, so maybe he has a good offseason and I don't see 7 wins on the schedule. I might not even see 6. I mean, their offense is just so behind the times.
Oh, I know. It's like a 2008 offense. It's bad, but I don't know. I think the defense is going to keep them in games, even in some that they shouldn't be in. Like I don't see a problem with Miami. Honestly, I think they could win the Auburn game. And that the good thing is you have those 3 games sandwiched in between the Arkansas,
Yeah.
which is neutral.
That's a
but
great stretch of home games.
yeah, and I mean I wouldn't be shocked with how Bama's been on the road recently if some weird thing happened where they beat them again at home. Only problem with that at Tennessee game sucked. Your draw from the East being Tennessee and South Carolina is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
But at least you get South Carolina. Well, actually, no, I'd rather have Tennessee at home to be honest. But
At
yeah,
Ole Miss, they're gonna lose to Ole Miss.
For sure.
yeah,
Alabama, I could see them giving Alabama trouble. They had Alabama on the ropes last year in Bryant Denny.
yeah. And I beat them the year before at home.
Their talent on the defensive side of the ball is undeniable. They're gonna have a great defense. Receivers are good. Moose Muhammad's great. Evan Stewart's a good receiver. If Wegman will be able to get them the ball, then I could see a scenario where they get 7 or 8 wins. Their
Possible,
run,
but
their,
you finish your thought.
their run game is a question. They obviously lost A-Chain to your Dolphins, Matt.
Legends.
I'm just gonna have to see their offense to believe it.
Yeah,
I think
that's
they'll-
the big question. Is I don't really believe in Wegman. I just from the stuff that I saw
Who's-
from last year, I don't see it. There's so much pressure on Jimbo. I think it's going to be a little too much, especially if they haven't gotten all the kind of off the field locker room stuff resolved. Because that was a really big problem last year. I mean,
my prediction is based off that they've kind of run that off from the locker room.
if that's been run off, and they have good old Bobby Petrino has fixed the offense, it's very possible. 7-8 wins is very possible. I
If
just
that works, they're even probably more lethal than that, to be honest.
yeah.
If everything is clicking perfectly.
Yeah, if everything's clicking, 9 wins for sure. But I think it's just set up to kind of collapse on Jimbo Fisher a little bit, but we'll see. I mean, he is an overrated coach, but he's still a good coach.
No.
Rod, College Station this year.
Yeah, we'll be there. We will be there. It's a now yearly tradition for me to make the trek to College Station. I do have to say that is a great place to go for an away game.
Love College Station.
They are a cult, but if you spend some time there, they're a nice cult. So
Yeah, the first game where we went to where the SEC started serving beer was in College Station, and for that alone, I will always hold that in my heart. Fun town. I can't wait to go back.
yeah, we'll be in attendance. So
That
gonna
could be
be-
like three games possible
oh yeah,
too. That'll be Cal, Vandy, and TAMU.
Yeah, Matt, are you gonna join us for
Three SD game days.
Come on out. But yeah, they're interesting. They've got an interesting schedule. One more thing about them is they do return over 75% of their offensive and defensive production on each side of the ball. So, I mean,
I'm telling you, there's a possibility that A&M's the West dark horse if things click.
yeah, I mean the recruiting class that they had 2 years ago, those guys are going to be sophomores now. They're going to be playing, and it was the #1 recruiting class of all time at the time. So and obviously they've had some departures from that class and unceremoniously for a lot of those guys, but there's still a lot of really good players that are on
Talent.
A&M's
Yeah,
roster.
I have no question about the defense. I think it's going to be elite, but I'm worried they're just going to get left out to dry by the offense.
Yeah.
So
We'll see.
I think they skate by, go over, but the thing is, I still think Jimbo will probably be on the hot seat because if I was a fan with those rosters, I would be expecting a lot more, just with how things have been. And 10-win seasons aren't easy to get. I think it's been overblown by the Saban era of how hard it is actually to win 10 games in a season. Like that's a great season, but the roster that Texas A&M has had these past few years, there's no reason for them to have not had one.
Yeah.
They had the COVID year, but that was one of the weirdest years where you saw a bunch of teams that weren't even traditionally good have good years. So it kind of downplays that now that we're getting farther away from it. But it'll be interesting. Even with 8 wins, I still think stuff still heats up with him, just even with the recruits. They kind of did it to themselves, though, when they gave him that trophy that says Jimbo Fisher National Champion 20XX.
Yeah, you're just asking for disaster when you do something like that. I don't know. We'll see. The talent's there. I think he's still a good coach. It's just they've got to put it together.
So now we're going to do our division winners, East or West, and we will give our own dark horse from each division. All right, Nick, who you got?
So East is easy. Georgia Bulldogs, East champions, likely national champions. I know earlier when I was talking about Alabama, I said probably going to win the West, but I think as we've been talking about it and going through these rosters and schedules, I think LSU is going to win the West. And my dark horse in the SEC, not to win the East, but maybe get 9 wins somehow. I don't believe in Drinkwitz, but I think Missouri's offense could click. Their wide receiver room is so elite. If those guys get rolling and they get good quarterback play, 9 wins. Missouri.
Let's go, Nick. Yes. Yes. That's what I'm talking about. Who's your West dark horse?
West dark horse. I can't say Auburn, so I'm going to say Mississippi State. Mississippi State, first-year head coach. Maybe they get lightning in a bottle and have a good season.
I don't hate it. I would say mine for the East, obviously Georgia. I'm joining Nick with the dark horse as Missouri. Incredible choice, Nick. You know ball. It's a great choice. West, obviously champion is going to, well, for me, it's probably going to be Bama with a 10-2 season. And I do not care. My dark horse is the Auburn Tigers out of the West. And if I can't pick them, then I would probably go A&M, like I said in that last segment. But I believe. Get ready to learn the creed, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, just to set the record straight, Auburn is going 15-0.
It will be happening.
All right, Rod, what you got lined up?
So obviously East champion is going to be Georgia. They're just elite at every position, basically. And then my dark horse for the East, I don't know if you could call them a dark horse, but South Carolina. I think if they keep the momentum like I was talking about from last year, and if they can somehow upset Georgia early, I think there's a very good chance that they win the East. And then for the West, I'm picking LSU to win the West. I don't believe in Alabama. I think it's going to be one of Saban's poorer teams. I think LSU wins the West. And I am also going Auburn as my dark horse for the West. I think the Freeze era starts with a bang. I think it's going to be a really good year. So, yeah. Do y'all have any final thoughts as we go into the weekend.
I think my final thought is that I'm going to have to be on a plane in 6 hours. So looking forward to getting little to no sleep.
Matt, what's yours?
My final thought. The NHL playoffs have been crazy, and I'm depressed watching them happen. And I'm kind of mad that Florida's winning, even though it's fun to see the Maple Leafs lose. And Jarquez Hunter will be SEC Offensive Player of the Year.
I love it. I love it. My final thought is Peyton Thorne is a dark horse for the Heisman. And I am going to eat and drink so much next week on my honeymoon. It's going to be incredible. So
Remember
Right.
to use sunscreen.
I don't believe in sunscreen chemicals, but we won't go into that now.
Rod, can you just say once just say this, like I'm leaving this in, but
Okay.
just say yeah, I think Peyton Thorne is a dark horse for the Heisman, and he's way better than your dark horse JJ McCarthy or something, just so I can post it so we can piss
Okay.
off Michigan fans.
Okay. Yeah, I really think that Peyton Thorne is a dark horse for the Heisman, and I think he is far superior to JJ McCarthy in literally every way.
That'll be fun.
You're just gonna clip that for the
Yeah, just to
TikTokers
throw it
the
on
podcast?
TikTok and just
Yeah.
see. So we did that top 10 list, and there was like Michigan fans like, it was like, bro, like everyone knows McCarthy's good, but like he's nothing that he doesn't separate himself from the pack. He's like a AJ McCarron for Michigan.
Yeah. I did not people commented that, and I was like, who the fuck cares about JJ McCarthy?
Those comment sections or something else. All right, well, guys, thank y'all for tuning in. It was a great episode 4 covering the future SEC schedules and win-loss totals. We love having you here. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Southern Draw Pod, and southerndraw.substack.com for our written content from us. Thank you for listening.